Hello and welcome to another episode of the Coaching Outdoors podcast. I am Anna Marie Watson, your co-host, along with Paul Jeffries. And today we are joined by Philip Cowell, who is in Berlin, and I will invite him to introduce himself in a moment. And dear listener, how are you today? What has your day held? How have you moved through it? Where have you been? Where have you wandered? And just bringing that word in, because I feel that it really sets the scene for what we're going to dive into in relation to street wisdom today. So street wisdom is something that has very much been on my radar. I've been lucky to go to two events in the past, one in Frome, one in Bath. And Claire Bradshaw, who is one of our former guests, you might recognize her name. If not, go and check out episode 57. It's an absolute cracker, and she is up based in the Peak District near Paul as well. So you can see how the community of outdoor and nature connected coaching, it's all there, the relationships in between. So, Philip, please introduce yourself as a starting point, and then we've got plenty of time to unpack a little bit more about you and a little bit more about street wisdom and what the concept initiative is all about and how, as coaches, we can learn from it.
Thank you so much, Anna Marie. What a lovely start to the podcast. And hello, Paul, and hello, everybody.
Hi.
Listening or watching. And just to say, my name is Philip Cowell. I'm actually an arts fundraiser by training, by trade. So I've worked in arts fundraising for about 20 years. And then about 10 years ago, I discovered the power of walking, and certainly in this wonderful way, in a wondery kind of way that you just mentioned, Anna Marie, through street wisdom, which we'll talk about lots, obviously, as part of this podcast. And I've kind of, in a way, wiggled my career a little bit since then. I'm now in Berlin, as you just said, technically freelance, but my main job, my sort of my bread and butter, as it were, is for a theatre company where I fundraise for a lot of outdoor arts projects. So at some level, I'm an outdoor arts fundraiser, as well as a very keen outdoor wanderer and sharer of this joy of wiggling and wandering the streets in a more curious way, perhaps, than we're used to. And so I've done that. So that's my career is about 20 years into my wiggly career, squiggly career, as some people call it. Just to say, I did actually have a little moment in the corporate world. I've mostly worked in charities fundraising, but I've worked in the corporate world as well in sustainability as a sustainability copywriter, effectively telling stories about the incredible new opportunities posed by sustainability in the face of course, great uncertainty and change that's going on. And I also see actually street wisdom is part of that as well, in a funny way, because I see street wisdom as almost like an innovation practice. The streets being an incredible place to find new ideas and inspiration. So in a weird way, I've kind of wiggled and squiggled my way to this point, mostly through arts fundraising, a little bit through corporate sustainability work. And street wisdom for me, I suppose, is almost a bit like a side hustle or a side street hustle, perhaps, if I'm allowed a little pun so early on. Which is to say, it's really where a lot of my heartbeats happen, because I get to bring people together. That's my main job at Street Wisdom, is building community, getting people all around the world to sort of meet on street corners and see things differently.
Oh, Philip, thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. And I think, again, we love to get some of this diversity into our cross section of our guests. And I think what you've just outlined there, is fantastic. We've definitely not had an outdoor arts fundraiser, or or to be fair, anybody that a copywriter talking and telling stories and narratives. We love the fact that you've found the power of walking, because you've come to the right place. This is a podcast where we love all things walking and being outdoors, and so it's just great to hear that and have that background. And we're going to dive into that in more detail as we go through the podcast. So I guess my first pun, we're going to walk you back though to your childhood. And perhaps our first question, we ask all of our guests this question. We love the question. There's two parts to it, Philip. The first part is, what is your earliest memory of being outdoors? And then why do you love being outdoors so much?
Oh, I love this question. I think if I was to think sort of, it's really, gosh, it's it's interesting, isn't it? The minute you talk about your childhood, you sort of like, well, look, first of all, just to say, I'm an incredibly lucky person. I had a very, very lovely childhood. I feel very lucky about that. Brought up by a loving family down in Folkestone in Kent. So I'm a seaside boy by heart, as it were. So for me, really early memories are, being on the Folkestone sands, being on the pebbly beach along the way in Hythe along the coast there. Going climbing amongst rocks, seeing sea anemones for the first time, going into the sea, with my mum. She loves the sea so much. Having ice cream, that's like such a treat, right? It's still a treat. I'm 45, and that's like basically my main treat is having an ice cream. So I think I deeply associate the outdoors with that kind of joy. And then, I mean, I think why do I love the outdoors so much? What is it about that I love? I suppose I just said it. It's joy. I do associate the outdoors with joy. Something about sunlight, just being in the natural light. I think you literally can see things more clearly. You've got all the colors of the rainbow in natural light. I don't know. I think it's the joy bit. I suppose there's also, I don't know, the poet Garrison Keillor. I should say I'm a sort of, by day I'm a fundraiser, by night or a community builder. By night I'm a poet. And we might talk about my poem that I wrote in the book Wonderful, which David Pearl, the founder of Street Wisdom, wrote a few years back. But I love poetry as well. And Garrison Keillor, the great poet, American poet, real master of light verse. In other words, very accessible poetry written in a kind of ordinary tongue, as it were, which I love. He talks about poetry for him being a kind of storm home, which I love, and that comes from he is from outside Chicago, and as a kid, with all the storms in that neck of the woods, as it were, you would, if you were away from home, you would have to know where your storm home was. In other words, where you would sort of stay out of a storm, stay safe out of a storm, whatever that was, whether it was your best friend's home, or a shack or something, just somewhere that you could keep safe out of the storm. And funnily enough, I sort of see the outdoors for me as a kind of storm home in a way. I mean, I'm lucky in many ways, but I don't actually live anywhere where a storm is going to particularly endanger my life. But in that sense of just feeling at home outdoors, it's like a temporary home. The other poet, the poet Frederick Seidel, has this amazing line about the greatest hotel in the world is the smell of rain about to fall. And it's like, when you just get that moment of, I guess it's petrichor in this sense, but also just whatever it is that the senses are throwing at you. And if you're in the moment, if you're in your body, if you're lucky to be able to do that, then that for me is a kind of home. So in a funny way, it's my second home as well.
Nature being our second home. Too true. Nature is indeed our home. We've just lost our way and become somewhat disconnected and disassociated with it, as we live in little boxes with straight lines, and as we all know, nature does not do straight lines. Yeah, thank you for that. And continuing our time travel back to the past, when you look over your life so far, what key milestones have shaped your journey to your current work and life?
And I would say it's more wiggly in a way, like I said earlier. It's more wiggly than milestones in a funny way. And lots of accidents. I mean, there's that Mel Robbins idea, which is that I think she's actually quoting someone else as well. That we're, she asks people, how are you? And if they say fine, she gets very cross. Fine, fine. This is for her the F word, because there was one in, I think she says 400 trillion chance. I think someone has worked it out that there's 1 in 400 trillion chance of you being born you. In other words, your parents meeting, their parents meeting, the great grandparents meeting, ... So in other words, like, wow, this is all a bit of an accident. And then everything else in my career is also a bit accidental. I mean, I sort of literally mean it. So when I moved to, after growing up in the Southeast Coast, I had a fantastic, amazing time at university studying philosophy and English literature up at York University, and got to spend 4 lovely years there, and did what a lot of people did back then. So we're talking 25 years ago, which was to move to London. I don't think that's what's happening so much anymore, and I think that's it's a great thing in many ways. It's a shame in other ways. London sort of desperately needs young creative minds, but that's for another podcast, let's say. But I moved to London, and I remember. So I'm just sort of answering the question in terms of one of my wiggly milestones was I literally was. I had a meeting somewhere in central London. I was looking for a job, blah blah blah, and it started to rain, and so I was running to the tube, and there were these. It was just the first time really that they had these chuggers, charity muggers. Terrible phrase. Sorry, that's really offensive probably. But people fundraising on the streets for charities, which works very well. That's why they're still doing it. And this person offered me an umbrella. And so I just sort of, ran under the umbrella. I was like, yes, please, yes, please. It was that really was a stormy, rainy moment. And we had a little chat. They tried to get money out of me. I had no money, but I thanked them. And then suddenly my phone rang, and it was someone offering me a job, my first job in the arts sector as a fundraiser to become. I was probably administrator at that time, but I then became a fundraiser. But my point being, had I gone down the tube in that moment, I may have missed that opportunity. In other words, I see it more as these gorgeous accidental moments. So that was my first sort of moment that I got entered into the charity world. I then was able to. I worked at the Arvon Foundation, which might be interesting to some listeners. It's a sort of in a way, it's an outdoor creative writing charity. They have all these houses around the country, and people literally write in the beautiful gardens of houses that were owned by writers like Ted Hughes and John Osborne. And I worked there for a good 5 or 6 years, and then moved to English Pen, which is another literature charity. And I suppose those are key moments in my development to getting here. I met my life partner in amongst all that. I was in London for most of that time. Brexit happened, which was a huge shame for me. I love my European identity. Again, in a way, that sort of was an accident that then led me to Berlin because I wanted to keep my European sense of self as well. And in amongst that, there was a sort of moment of, let me just check the corporate sector. Let me just double check that might not be the right place or might be the right place for me. And I think even that entry point there was a bit. I mean, it was a bit random. I saw a job advertised at Abel and Cole, the veg box company. and they simply advertised the job title as wordsmith. What they meant was senior copywriter. Now, I'd never been a copywriter, but because they said wordsmith, I felt able to go for it. And also, I've lots of luck. You can tell I'm a white male. I have lots of privilege, so I was very lucky, essentially, to get that job. But again, I sort of stumbled my way. I suppose that's all I'm trying to say is I've sort of stumbled my way here, and I think that's a very street wisdom thing. I think it's a street wisdom approach. And so that's sort of how I've got here, which is I'm in Berlin. I'm working mostly for a theatre, Good Chance Theatre, which we might talk about a little bit, because we do a lot of outdoor arts projects, and also street wisdom and various other things. I'm just sort of trying to get through the day, basically, and I'm having a lot of fun.
Fantastic. I love it. I think that's singularly the best answer we probably ever had to that. That I've got wiggly, stumbled, walking. There's so much great stuff here, Philip. And really, it's what Anna Marie and I find when we hear the answers to these questions is that the richness of how so much of that background in those last 20 years, when you look at it and you hear that for the first time, how it just pieces parts of you together. The English pen, writing in a garden, there's rain that you brought up under the umbrella. So the weather, the outdoors, it's all in there, isn't it? And there's this sort of experimental side, and I just love your energy. You bring a lot of energy, and I can see, given even in Able and Cold for a wordsmith, they just thought, gosh, this guy's got a lot of energy, let's go with it. It seems really good. So thank you for that. That was such a really rich and lovely way to describe that background to you. So moving on, you've described yourself as an outdoor arts fundraiser. Tell us what's this specifically entail? Tell us about what you're really doing at the moment. We've kind of come right up to present day.
Thanks, Paul. I really appreciate that. I love this work. I love this work. So I work principally at a theatre company called Good Chance Theatre, that began outdoors, as it were, in the Calais jungle refugee camp in 2015. So it was set up by two fantastic playwrights called Joe Murphy and Joe Robertson, or just simply the two Joes, as we call them. Amazing playwrights, very young men at the time. I think they were between jobs, shall we say, in 2015, as that incredible moment, in a way that the ramifications of which are still unfolding, when hundreds of thousands, millions of people were on the move across Europe. And they just wanted to find out what was happening, particularly with the people at the Calais border there, as lots of people were sort of living in makeshift camps, but very much in a way in a sort of created a temporary city with all kinds of different regions and areas, often based on sort of nationalities. It had cafes. It was very much, it was a living, breathing city, as it were, on our border, our in the sense of UK, and they just wanted to find out what was happening, and did what a lot of young people did at the time, which was to volunteer their time. Went for a couple of days, 3 days, stayed a bit longer, and actually stayed for about 9 months. When they realized that there was so much culture and storytelling and play happening in the camp, but what there wasn't was a central location where people could come together safely in a very dangerous situation and practice this a little bit more, experience it a bit more, and just enjoy the wonders that are the arts, our ability to tell stories and share stories and expand our hearts almost effortlessly. And so they quickly raised a bit of money to get a geodesic dome built. And that's what they did. They basically built our first ever temporary theatre of hope, and we then built 11 more, from Calais to Paris to London to Coventry, and beyond. And essentially that's our first sort of moment of outdoor arts. So bringing people together in the dome, but also outside the dome. People would fly Afghan kites outside that dome, and that then led to what has become Good Chance Theatre, which is this year 10 years old. And I've been there 6 years, and my first job was working on their really big second project called The Walk with Little Amal, which I hope some of your listeners have seen or heard of, where we basically created with Handspring Puppetry Company this incredible giant puppet of an 8-year-old girl called Little Amal. So she's a big giant of a little girl, an 8-year-old girl who was on the move from the Syria-Turkey border through Europe to the UK. And effectively, she tells the story of the hundreds of thousands of young unaccompanied minors who did a similar route. Because essentially, the Joes realized that they didn't understand enough what her story was or their story was. And so we wanted to use the arts to find out. But the end result is this huge outdoor puppetry experience that lasted about 9 months in 2021, which is still going on to this day. And I was very lucky to be brought on as a fundraiser for that project. We raised almost £3 million to get that project up and running. You might remember Sultan's Elephant, which was a huge project from the early 2000s, where just beautiful giant elephants and animals and people appeared on street corners around the UK. I was very moved by that. This is one of my outdoor moments in my past that helped get me to where I am today. And so I very much saw the link between what they had done with Sultan's Elephant in around 2005. And I wanted to recreate it, but with that extra social purpose, which was to get these stories out there that hadn't been told or heard. That being essentially what I think the arts is about getting untold stories, out there into the world. And then since then, we've created the largest ever Afghan kite flying festival outside of Afghanistan. Last year, we commemorated the 85th anniversary of the Kindertransport with 200 young people, mostly from displaced backgrounds, dancing, creating an incredible dance piece, which we had performed outdoors in train stations and on beaches and in city squares across Europe. To mark that key historic moment of welcome that is very much part of the Great Britain's history. And we have got an incredible history of welcome. Is the point of that project, and let's not forget that, and let's lean into it as well. Was the sort of subtext. I think that's that. Yeah.
What a number of little snippets and insights into your work, and some really inspirational stories going on there. And I think what's really resonating with me is this piece around the blend of the outdoors and creativity and movement and storytelling, and how that can really be a vehicle and a platform for so much. And it's all about being in relationship with the outdoors, whether that is as an individual, as a group, as a community. How do we come together and be in relationship and support each other? And curious to anyone who's listening in what they what's going on for them, and whether they've been and seen any of these events. And starting to move a little bit towards street wisdom, and that part of your squiggly wiggly life work. And we've been really keen to learn more about this. Particularly, it's usually held within the urban environment, And a lot of time we do get our listeners asking questions around coaching conversations within the urban space and how that is possible. And yeah, in a nutshell, tell us, what is street wisdom?
Oh, I love that. Thank you, Anna Marie. And in a nutshell, let's exercise our imaginations at a time of great change. That's the invitation of street wisdom. Let's exercise our imaginations at a time of great change. We talked about puns earlier. There's a bit of a pun there, obviously. Exercising our imaginations is a sort of bit of a phrase, but we're talking about it in that sense of we're getting out, we're getting up, we're getting out, we're getting outside, we're exercising, so we're getting all the benefits of moving our bodies. But actually, we're bringing in our imaginations. I've gone straight to my head, which is funny because in a way, the imagination is definitely not just there, right? But we're trying to bring in that bit of ourselves as well. We are imagination creatures at our heart, and we do forget that. I just think that's fine. That's fair enough. Life's actually quite hard. You might have noticed. So I totally get that we forget some key things. But we're really, really sort of quite insistent at Street Wisdom on this idea of taking your imagination for a walk, as being that's the key part of it. So let me backtrack a little bit, because in a way there's a lot to say about Street Wisdom. And it means a lot of different things to different people. And I think that's part of its charm and its greatness. At some level, the first key thing to know is this insight that David Pearl had, the founder of Street Wisdom, that answers are everywhere. So inspiration is all around us. It's here already. We don't have to go to Barbados for our retreats anymore. You can literally just go outside onto your street corner and, as it were, have a moment of insight. So David Pearl, and I recommend your listeners have a little look at his website, davidpearl.net, or his book Wonderful, which I'm sure we'll talk about as well, which talks all about the street wisdom thinking. But just to give you to sprinkle a little sort of insight here, which is that he was working with top level sort of C-suite people, CEOs and COOs and all the other letters that I don't really know what they stand for. And he's very much not a coach, but he does see himself as he's a sort of creative confidant, as it were. But he that's his own choice, but he's effectively working one-to-one with people in, I would say, quite a coachy way. And he was working with people in big, tall, shiny glass steel buildings, and helping them with their issues, with their problems, with their challenges. And they would scribble things down, and he would ask them questions head to head, brain to brain, as it were. And we're talking about sort of 15 years ago. And David noticed that when he went with the client from the top of that big shiny building down the lift or the elevator, for our American friends, and out the front door, and literally joined them to their car in the car park, he noticed it was often in these moments outdoors in the car park, can you believe it, that the client would often have a breakthrough moment. And it made David think. That is one. I hope you get to meet David. He's a great thinker and feeler and imaginer and all sorts. He's the whole body. This is embodied intelligence we're talking about. But he's really, if he gets a thought, he'll follow it through. And he followed that thought. Where will it go? What does this insight tell us? That people are having, his clients are having the greatest insights outdoors in the car park after the session has finished. And he followed that idea and realized there's something to this being a three-dimensional wiggly squiggly body. Yeah, and also just that actually we normally see the streets as really quite dull and uninspiring places. He's in car parks at this point, and he realized actually, no, I get it. If you're tuned in that moment, if you're up for it, if you've just got that facility in that moment to sort of stop, to pause, to notice what's around you, suddenly you realize there's so much to discover. So many smells coming at you, so many visuals, words on posters, sounds, people speaking, conversations overheard, patterns in the street, the way the light is falling. It's all up for grabs in terms of what's meaningful. I mean, we're talking about making meaning here. And that's the point of street wisdom, is that it's turning an ordinary everyday thing like a street and a moment on a street corner into an extraordinary experience. And so that's why we often talk about it as finding the wonder in the everyday. Every day. And so that there's lots of ideas in a way there, but it's, for me, that comes together in this really lovely idea of exercising our imagination at a time of great change. I mean, we are in probably, it feels like it, the most uncertain, times, volatile times, vulnerable times. And actually, I don't think the answers are going to come from not necessarily thinking. I mean, I think thinking can be great as well. I really want to promote thinking, good thinking, not overthinking, good thinking, particularly thinking that you do with a friend, perhaps, in that kind of lovely, slow down, kind of full body way. Um, but these times, I don't think Google searches are going to do it. I don't think, I don't think the answers are in these books behind me. Not necessarily. Some might be, but let's not forget that there's going to be a lot of inspiration outdoors as well. And that's essentially what street wisdom is all about. And let's just add a little bit there at the end, and then I'll stop, which is that, of course, the streets, they have all these signs and symbols all around them. So you can sort of use, the metaphor of the street, as it were, in your thinking. If you literally joined a street wisdom workshop and found yourself walking down a dead end, wow, what's that telling you right now? If you hit a roundabout, and actually you've got a lot of options to consider. Which turning are you going to take? And what about looking up? It's not just the street, of course. It's the sky, the clouds, the trees, the moon or the sun, depending on the time of day. Or maybe there's a left and right turning, and you've literally got to choose, which one will you take? And so we're kind of literally doing that with people on a street wisdom workshop. A phrase I just threw in there as if that's really obvious, but I should just explain that at the core of a street wisdom experience is our free workshop, walking workshop, in other words, which anyone can take part in. They're free. That's what I love about street wisdom. It's free. There are loads of university courses you can do that are really expensive, and that's brilliant. But at Street Wisdom, we talk about the invisible university of the streets all around us at any time. It's available to us for free. Let's not ignore that. In fact, we ignore it at our peril. So street wisdom is, in summary, it's a bit of dilly-dallying. We're encouraging people to dilly-dally, right? Like, we're literally trying to get them off the straight and narrow, and into a more dilly-dally, wiggly, squiggly, non-linear path. Because there's real fruits there. I mean, for example, and then I'll stop for this moment. Look at how Velcro came about. Velcro is a fantastic example of street wisdom in a weird way. In fact, it links really nicely to sort of non-urban settings as well. So the founder of Velcro, Georges de Mistral, went for lots of walks with his dog in the woods and the fields around where he lived. and he noticed suddenly that there were these I think it's burdock burrs that were sticking to his dog's fur, and it's that moment of insight outdoors where he clearly slowed down, stopped, paused to notice what was going on, and that understanding of nature as having this sort of natural adhesive element. Could he apply that to something else? Dot dot dot. Well, yes, he could. It became Velcro, a kind of $2 billion business, And so I'm not. It's not to say there's loads of business opportunities out there. That's not what street wisdom is about. But it's certainly saying there are loads of ideas out there. There's loads of inspiration. But to do it, you've got to do a little bit of work to access them.
Wow, Philip, thank you so much. And there's so much richness in all of that. And look, for many of our listeners, they will be very familiar with many things here, Philip, that we talk about on the podcast. There's a lot of somatic work going on here where we're using body and brain. We're using, as you call it, imagination, going for a walk. But all of that is in unison. It's all kind of coming together, and that's very much what you're, advocating. There's a whole load of stuff unpacking around systemic thinking, getting outside the glass office building and getting into the system. And there is so much richness in the street that we don't need to go to Barbados. We could actually go to a street in London and we could find Barbados. It'll be right there in front of us with the music and the sounds and the smells and you're advocating all of those sensory stuff. And we've got people actively in our network, Anna Marie and I, who are working on urban coaching, coaching in an urban environment using metaphor. As you rightly say, it's so rich. I would encourage the listeners, do go to streetwisdom.org and watch the video of David Pearl, as I have. He has this interesting one I found quite interesting. What struck me today was there's a lot more word or verbiage in the city, written on walls, in graffiti, written on the floor. You're not going to find that so much in the countryside. But it's a really interesting part of the video where David suddenly says, clear, keep clear. A bus goes by with the word clear on it. And suddenly he says, clear, what is that trying to tell me? And it's that sort of richness of creativity that for somebody, the word keep clear or clear may have some resonance and could really mean something very important to somebody. So it's that richness, I think, you're talking of and tapping into, which is fascinating. And I know our listeners, tell us listeners what you think to this, because it's a real rich vein. And of course, so many of us live in cities and we live in urbanization. We don't, have cows and sheep and things, on our doorstep. So it is really talking to the masses. So really that brings us on to what's your current involvement, Philip? What are you currently working on?
I love that. Thanks, Paul. And just to say also, yeah, I mean, I think over 50% of people live in cities right now. It's going to be 68% projected by 2050. We're going to have to get good at this. There's some really inspiring placemaking work around this. I think cities, there's some really interesting green cities movements going on, national park cities. That idea of nature, sort of nature and the nature non-nature divide being, part of the problem, I think is really key here. And in fact, just to say that, I mentioned that we have these workshops all around the world, and they're led by our incredible volunteer hosts. I think you mentioned Claire earlier,
yeah.
Anne-Marie,
yeah.
And she's one of I've been working with about 200 hosts over the last 3 years in my more formal role as a sort of community builder at Street Wisdom. That's what I currently do, and just to say that we've actually we're sort of working with our hosts to really fine-tune the workshop experience so that they can adapt it to wherever they are. And so if they are in a more non-urban setting, the Street Wisdom workshop will still work really well for them. It's a really good point that you make, Paul, that out in, say, in a field or wherever there's not perhaps so many words as such. And of course, words are just one aspect of that urban experience. The formation of clouds, the way the trees are stood together, and all that sort of thing. There's going to be so much richness there as well. So that's. I just wanted to sort of say we're working with our amazing hosts to really, in a way, flex the Street Wisdom Workshop experience so it can really adapt to your setting. But it absolutely is. It's born from an urban setting and it works really well in an urban setting. And my current involvement is that bit of building community. So I get to work with our over 200 volunteer hosts who might lead one or two or more workshops a year. We're getting this new thing of almost like workshop clubs where people are leading them once a week for a month or even longer. We've got a really long-term one in Salt Lake City at the moment, in Melbourne. And so, yeah, we're in over 90 countries so far in terms of where Street Wisdom has been experienced by people. We've walked with we think it's now about 25,000 people have experienced the Street Wisdom process, as it were, or the workshop experience. And so I get the absolute privilege of sort of encouraging the hosts, bringing them on board, getting them up to speed. They can join one of our monthly online workshops from anywhere in the world to experience it for themselves. First of all, I think that's probably fair enough, that you should probably experience it once before you then share it yourself. And people can do that now. We've got these sort of once or twice a month online workshops. So literally, if I'm leading one, I'll be out on the street on my phone using Zoom. So it's like a Zoom meeting, but outdoors. And if you can't get outdoors, we learned from the pandemic, you can do this indoors. And in fact, Street Wisdom worked surprisingly well during the pandemic. And we had loads of workshops from home where people would apply the same idea of this incredibly creative act of attention and meaning making to their own everyday environments indoors as well. And of course, books, for example, are an incredible source in that sense of inspiration, because what you're drawn to becomes sort of fascinating. That word in that title might just spark something off for you. So that's my job, is bringing that community together, bringing people on board, encouraging new hosts, and then very much ensuring the most really high quality experience for our participants, making sure they have a really good time, getting their feedback, bringing that feedback into the process, improving our systems as much as we can do. We're a small outfit. It doesn't take much to do this, right? It's just me, David, and the wonderful Vanessa, and Lauren. Sorry, we've just got Lauren, who's joined us in Melbourne, who is helping out as well. We're just a little team, but we kind of see the hosts as this incredible, it's like the ripple effect, right? It's like if we just sort of nurture this incredible group, then the impact could be quite big. So that's our job, is to look after the hosts and really nurture the Street Wisdom experience. And then, of course, bang on about it endlessly to people, because we sort of can't talk about it enough.
Thank you for that, and just giving us insight. And I'm always blown away sometimes with some initiatives, actually, how the core team is so small and the impact that it can have. And when you were sharing about the number of events and the impact that it has had, it's immense. And that's only the tip of the iceberg. It's almost what I find with the podcast as well. And Paul and I have spoken about it many times. You only hear a fraction of what the ripple effect really is. And that's the beauty of releasing something into the world, whether it is an event, whether it is a podcast. It then takes on a life of its own and just grows. Yeah, and I've just been struck just by listening. It just prompted me to remember that. So I've been on 2 Street Wisdom events, one in Bath and then one in Frome in 2018. And I wrote a blog about my experience in 2018, which I haven't shared with you yet, Philip, and I will do. because it really captures my impressions and reflections of the event and the insights that came from it. And one of the pieces was around capturing visual images. And for me, I'm very, very visual, and with my phone on flight mode, particularly when you're in this kind of wandering state, because you don't want to be interrupted. Um, and part of my insights from the street wisdom was it was all around time and how I relate to time and position myself in time. And in Frome at the time, there was a clock, but it didn't have any hands. So it was the clock that told no time. And it really just got me thinking about the whole relationship of time and the pressure I was putting on myself at the time to fill my day and work-life balance, which I'm sure a lot of listeners, you will experience that yourself, or you have conversations with clients around. So I will put up a link actually to the blog, which I'd forgotten I'd written when we share this podcast. And Philip, I will send it to you as well, and kind of curious to hear your reflections. And clearly that was 2018, and street wisdom has progressed since then. But coming to your insights, what insights and maybe some examples that you've gained, or what you've observed in others, because we all love a good story, and the synchronicities with street wisdom as well. For me, that's what makes it so magical, because the rational and logical brain, it gets a bit dumbfounded, and it's like, but that can't be true. It's just like beyond my logic rationale.
Wow, thank you, Anna Marie, for sharing. And I just love that story. I mean, it's so visual, that the clock with no hands. I love that so much. I might ask you to do something in a moment, which is something I do with people, which is to get them to reduce their wisdom that they've learned in like 3 words, 3 or 4 words. So see if we can do it in a moment. But yeah, so I had a really good first street wisdom workshop experience. And I almost didn't, right? So it was 2015 for me. Again, it's about 10 years since I've been involved in street wisdom as a volunteer, until taking over the more formal role of looking after the community about 3 years ago. But my first one was with David Pearl, the founder of Street Wisdom in London, on the South Bank Centre, which was just amazing. And no, but the thing is, it actually wasn't amazing, because I was doing it and I had a lovely time, and David was his usual wonderful self, and I was I did the whole experience. And then, a key part of it is the sort of sharing at the end. We'll probably talk about the 3-part process very briefly. We might talk about it, but in case we don't talk about it, there are 3 parts to a street wisdom workshop. The first part is the tune-up, where you sort of tune the musical instrument that is your body. This incredible sort of innate navigation system that you've had your whole life. We tune it up, because the everyday life it's not conducive to slowing down and seeing things fresh. So we just need to tap into a few things to tune up, which is literally going for a series of walks, with these invitations to walk in a certain way, whether that's being drawn to something you're attracted to, or slowing down, or just seeing the beauty everywhere. Whatever the tune-up is, it's all about getting back into our body, sort of getting out of that default system, of non-attention, and really into the magic of attention. And then the second part is the quest, where you literally take your question for a walk. So we invite you to come up with a question around life or work or play or love or whatever it is you want to ask the streets. I mean, people I've experienced, I've led many workshops, and people talk about everything from, I want to spend time doing a new hobby. Give me some ideas for my new hobby. From everything from that to sort of, should I leave my partner? I've literally had that, and other things. I've used street wisdom on a personal level to deal, with things like a grief. I lost a friend, and I very much use my street wisdom practice just to sort of help me come to terms with that very lightly. I wouldn't say it, And of course, we're not saying, don't replace street wisdom for the really essential, core, urgent stuff. If you need help from a therapist and all that sort of thing, of course, do that. But when you're ready, the streets are there too to offer insights and inspiration. And so I had my first ever workshop, almost at the end of it, just about to go to the third part, which is the sharing, where everyone comes back together to share their stories. And a bit like the way you did just then, Anna Marie. It's such a lovely moment where obviously our hearts expand because humans, being humans, we can't help it. We empathize more. We see the story through their shoes. We might even have seen a similar thing on our walk. But we took a different interpretation, so we get to share different perspectives and all that sort of thing. And basically, on my first ever workshop, I didn't have anything. I'd had a great time. I'd walked around the South Bank area in London. It was a lovely sunny day, and all that sort of thing. Blah blah blah. I was a bit worried, but I just thought, no worries. I'll just tick. I did a street wisdom workshop, and my question, by the way, had been, I was 35 at the time, had been around, how can Philip feel more secure in the world? I say Philip because we often invite people to put their name in the third person. It's quite nice to sort of look after yourself in a friendly way like that. So, hey, streets, how can Philip find a bit more security in the world? And as I say, I didn't get an answer. So I headed off to the sharing. And as I headed off to the sharing, so we're at the South Bank Centre area, so around by the Royal Festival Hall, and a man walked by with a security jacket on his back, wearing a security jacket, and on his back literally was the word security. And I was like, oh God. And for me, if I was to now reduce that to 3 or 4 words, which is it's really nice to do, just to encourage, really helps you sort of fix the meaning and remember it and come back to it. It would be something like, in terms of security, you can share your concerns about security, outsource your worries. Other people have your back. The world's got your back. That would be the way of reducing it to 3 words. World's got your back. 4 words. Okay. And I actually I did a workshop the other day, an online one, and I actually asked people if I could use some of the wisdom, the 3-word wisdom that they shared on this chat. And we've got some lovely, I don't say names, so it's no problem. Here are some other insights from people on a recent street wisdom workshop. The signs are on the inside. That's one. Isn't that great? There's no one right way. Isn't that amazing? Beauty in everything. Be more bamboo. The answer's in the trees. Do what feels right. Take the other path. I just need to get out. So good. And there are loads, there's loads more like that. But I think that key thing about, it's a practice. You can apply it to a specific issue or problem or challenge or whatever. But it's also, I think it's that thing of connecting with the felt sense of direction in your life. It's connecting with your felt sense of direction. David, sometimes very poetically, if he's feeling very poetic, he will talk about your inner swallow, your inner swallow. So there's a bit of you, or at least let's just say for now, there's a bit of you that knows which way to go next. And so at Street Wisdom, we're tapping into that bit of you that knows which way to go next on all these different areas of life and all that sort of thing. But I think that's for me, that's the really gorgeous aspect of all this. So yes, it's all about specific problems, challenges, things that we're facing, but it's also that quite big idea of your sense of direction in life, which is why I clearly love it so much. I'd love to know,
Oh,
Anna Marie, can you reduce your wisdom to 3 or 4 words? What would you say if I was to ask you that?
Ooh. Um, there's a piece around So what kind of came up straight away was like time doesn't exist, or you make time, you make your own time. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Thank you.
Getting a little bit philosophical here.
And it's interesting for me, your clock did stop time, enjoy freedom.
Mm.
That's what it did for me. So there you go. The metaphors are all there. It's amazing, Philip, to just get your sense of, and I really like the three levels as well. For, again, listeners, go onto the website, read the book by David Pearl, wonderful, and it's all in there. But it's really good. It really much works around us as coaches and some of the way that we have this grounding, we tune up, we tune in to ourselves, our own inner nature and our external nature. And then there's that noticing, go and explore and or stumble, wander, etc. But then, that's such a useful skill, and I'm really pleased to see it coming into so much training for leadership now is reflection. This art of stopping, sharing, and reflecting. I think it's singularly one of the best skills we can teach our younger people to do, and that's just to stop. And I think there's a bit in the book where David talks about, I think he did some work with some people, an organization, supermarkets, and one lady stood up and said, "I have never been for a walk." And I mean, just to get your head around that, and this was, it doesn't say her age, but, she's never been for a walk. I mean, I just was almost could not get off that page when I read that. I was like, what? But of course, the reality is that's, of course, it's true. And so getting somebody just to walk out into the street instead of rushing through it is fantastic. And, there's so much richness in those three levels that you discuss. And so really just kind of bringing that a little bit, I suppose two parts really, just to capture this, pull it together, as I say, with looking at the time we're enjoying ourselves, is that if you're a coach and you want to get involved, you're another Claire Bradshaw and you want to kind of get involved, Philip, how do you get involved, and what sort of transferable ideas and concepts do you think street wisdom and coaching, how does that talk to us about that?
Nice. I think there's a couple of things here. And Paul, just to say, that was so lovely the way you responded to Anna Marie's wisdom as well. It was a bit like in a street wisdom sharing. That's what we're really encouraging is that sort of in a way improvisation. Because we can learn from each other. There's so much to learn from each other, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so no, I loved that. Thank you. And I think there's a couple of things in terms of the wonderful coaches listening in today. I think street wisdom is there for you as part of your reflective practice, right? So it's for them, it's for you as coach. Use it. It's sort of free. It's kind of freeware, right? So David Pell's, I think, quite big idea was not just to sort of create this, but also just to send it out into the world. I mean, so literally, the technology, the open source technology is there. Take it. We just simply ask if you use it to sort of share on social that you've done that, just help spread the word a little bit. But for your own practice, give it a go. Take part in one of the online monthly workshops. Take part in an in-person workshop that's happening near you, and of course become a host yourself. Feel free to do that as part of your reflective practice. I think it's a great thing to do. We have a lot of coaches who do that, and we learn so much from them as well. So I think there's that aspect, but I think also it's some really clever phrase that someone used. And I think they might have been a coach, actually. They said something like, street wisdom is guided self-coaching. I thought that was lovely. I suppose, in other words, that the street becomes your coach. And so in a way, it's something you can give your clients as well, I suppose, is what I wanted to say. That second bit is that it's a free thing you could give your clients as part of their ongoing, whatever it is you're doing together, discovering together. You've got here a guided self-coaching practice. It's learning, it's ongoing, lifelong learning. It's the joy of discovery, finding the extraordinary in the everyday. So that's just something, it's almost like a gift you could give your clients. So it's a gift you can give yourself, and it's a gift you can give your clients. And then, I don't know, in terms of the transferable ideas or concepts, oh, that's so cool. That's such a big question. I mean, obviously, we've mentioned the book, Wonderful, by David Pearl, where he goes into all of the thinking around this. I mean, just to say, I probably haven't said that enough, that there's so much rigorous neuroscience and mindfulness and well-being and creativity theory behind here, right? None of this is accidental in that sense. So David did lots of research back in the day, 15 years ago. And then the Street Wisdom Workshop experience that I've just outlined, which goes from tune-ups to quest to sharing, has been very much refined over the years. It sort of was a bit bulkier in the past. Do you know what? We used to sort of insist that it had to be a 3-hour workshop. We flex things a bit now, so you can lead a workshop for an hour or an hour and a half, 2 hours. You can do 3 hours, and that's great too, by the way. But this idea of flexing a very core experience. The very core experience is still the same, I would say. But what we've done in the last few years is really adapt it. So a host that's in a more natural speech marks sort of setting can use it as well as in a much more urban one.
And I remember the one I went on was the full 3-hour immersive, and it was like an afternoon deep dive. And interesting to hear how now there is that flex. And for me, I mean, the timing of the book, and thank you so much for sending both myself and Paul a copy. It was very timely, and I've really relished dipping into it over the Easter weekend. And I really feel that it has set me up in a different way of being as I've moved through the weekend. And I will hands up admit I'm a planner. I'm a structured, diaryized, and my diary can sometimes become a bit squeezy. And actually, this weekend, I have given myself permission to go with the flow, which has been a really different way of experiencing the world. And I ended up just impromptu at a pilgrimage along the River Avon, source to sea, and that was just by a chance encounter with someone at an event that they mentioned. So it's like I've been following this little breadcrumb trail and just seeing what the universe has in store for me. So as you know, for me it's been a lot around like just letting go of control rather than my conscious mind like making all the decisions and planning in advance. It's been going like, well, okay, what's out there? Let's just see. Let's just play. Let's have some fun. Who's going to cross my path today? Which is the word joy you used earlier, like the joy in the moment, as opposed to everything kind of being premeditated and preordained. So just wanted to share that and thank you. And David, clearly as well for it. So I know coming up, you have a big event on the calendar, the Worldwide Wonder. So please do share a little bit about that, and ultimately, how can anyone who's interested get involved?
And just to say, I love the way you described that you're sort of following the nudge, following the twinkle, as it were. There are clues everywhere, right? It's almost like imagine if someone had planted loads of treasure around your weekend, and it sounded like you were like really just up for finding that treasure. It's really fun. I mean, it's really fun. Just to say, before this cool. I went for a walk and I just checked. I just said like, "Hey, streets, is there anything I shouldn't miss for this podcast?" And I'm in Berlin, right? I'm in Germany, and literally the minute I asked that question, a poster said "Licht und Schatten," which is light and shade in German. Which I think for me is a reminder just to say, you can bring the whole of you to this, the whole of yourself, the light and the shade to street wisdom. So though I veer, my personal bias is absolutely towards joy, partly because of the wonderful, I'm so lucky to, I crawled out of the sea and had this amazing time in Folkestone, as a kid. But and joy is a really important part of my life. But there is the shade here as well. I think it's just really important to, street wisdom can handle both. That's all I'd say. And so the Worldwide Wonder is just our big annual moment where we bring all our hosts together and run as many workshops around the world as possible on one day. In fact, this year on 2 days, the 27th of June and the 28th of June. We've done it for almost 10 years, I think. Not quite, 8 years, I think. And it's just a big excuse to get together, meet new people, share this wiggly way of being. And this year we've got incredible guests like the incredible warm data thinker Nora Bateson. We've got Sir Tim Smith from the Eden Project is going to be joining us. Dan Raven Ellison, the founder of Slowways. Tina Roth Eisenberg, the founder of Creative Mornings, will join us. So we have this sort of, as a foundation, the in-person workshops, that's the base, so we had 75 in-person workshops last year in over 30 countries, I think. And this year we'll have something similar. And then we've got this online program on top of that anyone can access anywhere, either from the streets or from the field or from your indoors environment, however works for you. And so with this online program this year, it'll be 25 hours online program, and we're going to have guests who will join us, these perfect strangers that we'll meet along the way, and they'll share their bits of wisdom. We don't know what it will be yet, and we'll all go off on our wonders, and it'll be a wonderful piece of nonsense at some level, but it'll also be incredibly meaningful and deep at another. I mean, David Pearl talks about it as very much summoning the Sangha, blowing the conch, getting like-minded, curious, kind people together to explore the world in this fresh way, because you know what, there's a lot going on in the world, and some of it's not so good. And as David says, the cavalry ain't coming. So we kind of have to get together ourselves. So it's really just about bringing people together and just going for a big walk.
That's fantastic, Philip. And that's really good. And we'd encourage listeners, go to the website. All the details will be on there, the dates, as Philip has just said. As I say, please find out about it, join in if it's really starting to prick your interest today and listening to this. So as we're kind of coming towards the end, Philip, we always love to ask our guests about what resources would you recommend to our community? That might be books, podcasts, individual sort of practices or journals or things. What would you signpost our guests to?
And that's a lovely question. Thank you. And obviously, apart from streetwisdom.org and the worldwidewonder.com, which is our sort of sister site, which is the annual get together. Although everything can be accessed through streetwisdom.org, just to say, including that TED talk which you mentioned earlier, which I do think is good. And just to say, the very short 5-minute 5 minutes. That's very short, isn't it? Video on the homepage is really good as well. It sort of sums it all up, much more pithily than I've done. So apart from that, of course, the book Wonderful by David Pearl, which I do love. I mean, I genuinely do love. I've read it about 3 times, and we'll dive back in with fresh eyes. And I think we mentioned I wrote a poem for the book when it was, it's in the front of the book, and it was as part of its first launch. just before the pandemic in 2020, January 2020. So that was it was a wonderful commission. It was very sweet when David asked me to write that poem, and indeed also Rachel Crowther, who was sort of the wonderful person before me, who brought the community together. Just want to flag Rachel, the amazing Rachel Crowther. Apart from all that, I have just mentioned Nora Bateson. We are so lucky. We are so lucky that she's joining the Worldwide Wonder as one of our special guests this year. And I have just fallen in love with her whole world, the warm data, the warm data world. She very much coined this phrase, warm data. It's such a huge area. That there's sort of I can't I couldn't possibly, as it were, do it credit right now. So I almost sort of float it as a flirt. I'm going to float that as a flirt. If you don't know about Nora Bateson's work, I really recommend it. I think there's something really visionary and beautiful and embodied and poetic and shape-shifting about her work. I mean, if just to sum it up, which you can't do, but in one line, a lovely line that she says, which I think really resonates with street wisdom, is your story changes my story. So it's all, she's very much working on that complex systems approach, but very much from an embodied point of view. And I just love that insight that your story changes my story, which we see every week on a street wisdom workshop. When people, I mean, they literally happen every week, and when people share their stories, there's this incredible dissolution of individuality, an incredible breakout into the collective, where you just don't know where you start and where other people end, and it's just fantastic, sort of the human mesh. So I really recommend, if that's okay, just to have one other recommendation, Nora Bateson today.
Of course. You can have one recommendation with grace. Love it. And that piece around stories and how that connects us. And for me, that just takes me back to around a fire, which our ancestors would have done for thousands of years. That oral tradition of storytelling, which, when you think of what has been lost from our indigenous knowledge, is huge. And yes, the written word has captured so much, and there is also the gaps in between. So Philip, how can people reach you and start a conversation?
Yeah. By the way, that was so beautiful what you just said. I'm just you should do a podcast, Anna Marie. You should do a podcast. You both should do a podcast. So follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. I've actually just started doing the Instagram posts. Age 45, I've become a content producer, and I'm really enjoying it. So please follow me. So follow us on streetwisdom_ for the Instagram, and then simply our email address, if folk are really interested in becoming hosts, is simply contact us at streetwisdom.org. So contact us at streetwisdom.org. Find out about our next workshops online, of course. But if you want to become a host of our Street Wisdom workshops, I'll then send you all the information you need to do that, basically. And also, I think it's more than just that. It's more than just sending you, effectively a PDF with all the information. We build a relationship, right? It sort of starts a new conversation, and we've actually, been able to work with hosts in some of our more corporate settings, which is the thing that funds our very little operation, but we do need to fund it, and so we do, huge big workshops. I just did one the other day with David and Vanessa for 500 people here in Berlin. Which helps sort of cover our core costs, as it were. But we can bring hosts in to things like that. We can't promise it, but it's all part of building a relationship with us. So it's sort of send us an email. Let's start a conversation. That kind of thing. ... Let's see where it goes, where we wander together.
Oh, what a treat. What a treat. Philip, thank you so much for your time today. It has been a
thank you.
much overdue conversation. I can't believe we've got to series 9 without having street wisdom on. But hey, we got here, and it's clearly exactly the right time just now, as the universe intended. So thank you for your wisdom. And yeah, anyone who is listening in, what has landed for you? What has caught your attention? Please do share and let us know. We're always curious to know. And other than that, it is a wrap for today. And if you're a first-time listener, welcome. Go back, listen to more episodes. If you are one of our community members who've been with us for a while, thank you for your support. Thank you for your time. We are always on the lookout for future guests. So any recommendations, do please fire them our way. We are really keen to showcase the work of practitioners in the outdoor space, in connection with nature, in a whole host of ways. And we're always blown away by the range and the diversity of the guests that we have. If you have not heard about our in-person event at Henley, I'm not quite sure how. If you're a listener, it's something we've been shouting from the rooftops about. Our event in Henley is our flagship in-person event, and we have a number of our amazing guests coming to facilitate in-person sessions, which are going to be kept purposefully small, really intimate, really experiential. And then we have keynotes, we have panel conversations, and then there is the space in between for mindful walks, wild swimming, shared conversations around a fire, a load of tasty food. So do come along. It is going to be an absolute treat. So tickets are on sale now. And other than that, it's a wrap for today. Thank you for taking the time to listen. And I think the words that I am going to be taking away, I just love that phrase, your inner swallow. Just coming back to your intuition. And I will admit, it has been something that has been on my radar today. I finally handed in my military kit. It's been a big thing. I've been a part of the army, a part of the reserves for 2/3 of my life. And I've been handing it as a bit of a safety net. And my inner swallow knew a while back to resign, to step away, and I finally did it today. So it's been quite a momentous day, I won't lie. And
Well
that
done.
word that you mentioned, Philip, just really landed with me. Like intuition, gut wise, I knew I should have left a few years ago and didn't. So yeah, my inner swallow has been set free, and I'm curious to see what projects emerge now, having let go of that tie and that energy. So thank you for those 2 words. It's an amazing what 2 words. And I think that kind of illustrates the whole street wisdom piece perfectly. Yeah. So thank you, listener. Thank you, Philip. Enjoy the rest of your day, and look forward to seeing you on another podcast episode soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So if you enjoyed what you've heard, like it, share across your network,
and subscribe to our YouTube channel and LinkedIn community page, the Coaching Outdoor Podcast.
Thanks so much in advance for your support.